The gold was never missing from our land. It was missing from our country. Let me tell you something that arrived without breaking news. No press conference, no celebration, no dramatic announcement. The number surfaced quietly inside a government report. Just one line, 94 tons of gold. At first glance it could pass for a routine statistic, the kind analysts skim past without stopping. But the longer you sit with it, the more unsettling it becomes. We had never reported gold on this scale before, certainly not this suddenly. No headlines announced a new megamine. No wave of foreign investors arrived with machines and money. No gold rush swept through our towns. And yet, in a single year, our official output climbed by more than 30 tons. Numbers like that demand an explanation. This one offered none. That silence forced a question that could not be ignored. If nothing visible had shifted on the ground, how could the figure change so dramatically on paper? This was never only a mining story.
It was about what had been seen and what had been overlooked for years. That number felt less like a discovery and more like a confession. Something always present was finally being admitted. Once that thought takes root, there is no walking away from it. Because if gold could emerge like this, quietly and suddenly, a deeper question follows. How much of our nation's wealth had been invisible before this moment?
Many people assumed we had struck new deposits or that a global price surge had inflated our totals. That would have been the comfortable explanation, but none of those things happened. Gold prices did not spike. No new mines opened. Existing mines did not double their capacity overnight. Nothing physical had changed. The land was the same. The mines were the same. The workers were the same people rising at the same hour. What changed was the way we chose to look at our own production. For years our gold sector operated inside a comfortable illusion. Reports were filed annually, numbers were smoothed, and no one pushed against them. As long as figures appeared reasonable, they moved through unchallenged. This made gold one of the most underreported resources imaginable. You did not need secret tunnels or elaborate smuggling schemes. You only needed soft oversight and paperwork never checked against reality. Gradually this became ordinary.
Not because people agreed to it, but because everyone adapted around it. The system ran smoothly while steadily bleeding value. When the numbers finally jumped, it felt shocking only because the truth had been suppressed so long. This was not growth, it was exposure. The gold had never stopped moving through hands, trucks, and borders. It had simply never been honestly counted. The miracle was not in the ground, it was in the accounting.
For too long our gold industry ran on an unspoken arrangement. We would extract the gold, companies would move it, and official numbers would stay modest enough to avoid attention. Everything carried the appearance of legitimacy. Reports had stamps. Documents had signatures. Exports had permits. But those who understood the system knew the numbers were hollowed out. Mines declared whatever was convenient. Traders moved gold through familiar routes. Artisanal miners sold to middlemen who never asked uncomfortable questions. The state collected taxes but only on what it was permitted to see. Most citizens never challenged this because they felt it every day. Mining communities remained poor. Roads crumbled. Electricity flickered and disappeared. Gold poured out of the ground, but its benefits never arrived. That disconnection solidified into something worse than habit. It became accepted reality. People stopped believing that mining wealth could transform anything. That resignation was the most dangerous thing of all. Because once underreporting feels ordinary, it stops resembling theft and starts resembling fate. By 2024 this had operated so long it felt permanent. No one believed it could be dismantled. And that is precisely why what came next carried such weight.
In early 2025 something quiet but transformative happened. We stopped treating mining data as administrative paperwork and began treating it as a national priority. No thundering speeches, no theatrical declarations. Instead, the procedures themselves changed. Reporting deadlines became firm obligations. Verification visits increased. Export records were placed beside transport data and compared line by line. Figures that had always lived in separate files were finally brought into the same room. When one document said 10 and another said 12, someone was required to explain why. Those mismatches had always existed, but no one had previously forced them into daylight. Now they were being examined. We were no longer standing at the entrance collecting fees. We had walked inside and switched on the lights. This shift is inseparable from a decision I made about gold. I stopped treating it as a passive export and started treating it as a strategic asset.
Gold would no longer simply be taxed. It would be tracked. And once genuine tracking began, the illusion could not hold. Production numbers climbed rapidly without any physical change underground. That was the moment it became undeniable. We had not created new gold. We had simply stopped pretending we could not see what was already there.
As the tracking system took hold, something clarifying happened. Our national gold total began rising, not gradually but sharply. Mines that had reported identical figures year after year suddenly showed higher output. No new equipment had arrived, no additional workers, no widened shafts. From the outside, operations looked identical. But on paper, the numbers kept climbing. This was the moment we understood what we were truly witnessing. Not growth, exposure. For years, production had been carefully trimmed before being officially reported. Now, with inspectors cross-referencing records and demanding justification, that trimming had nowhere to hide. Every figure needed defense. Official totals began aligning with reality for the first time. The illusion that the sector had been fully counted finally shattered. What startled observers was not that production rose. It was that the numbers had been suppressed for so long. The gold had always been extracted, always processed, always shipped somewhere. The single missing ingredient was honesty. When the system changed, truth surfaced naturally. No miracle was necessary, only visibility.
As we pressed deeper into the data, industrial mines alone could not account for the full jump. The scale was too significant. That forced us to look somewhere long avoided. Our artisanal sites. Tens of thousands of people had been digging gold by hand for years, their entire working lives. These were not minor activities. They were primary livelihoods, holding families and communities together. Yet their labor had never been formally acknowledged. Their gold moved through intermediaries, crossed borders quietly, and entered international markets under different names. On official paper, it did not exist. In reality, it was flowing every day. When we finally measured this output in 2025, the results were extraordinary. Approximately 42 tons came from artisanal production alone. That one figure rewrote everything. It proved our missing gold was not concealed underground. It had been in the hands of people never included in the count. This was not the discovery of new resources.
It was the recognition of forgotten workers. Once their production was incorporated, our national total became coherent. The mystery dissolved. What remained was a harder truth. A large portion of our economy had been invisible simply because it did not fit old systems. Being counted changed more than statistics. It changed power. Once artisanal gold became visible, it could also be governed. For years, smuggling networks flourished because movement was never monitored. Routes were familiar. Documents were recycled. Borders were crossed without scrutiny. Everything functioned because nothing was questioned. That shifted when we introduced one simple question. Where does this gold go next? Officials matched export permits against transport records. They compared mine output with border data. Patterns emerged, and patterns are dangerous to systems that depend on silence. Smugglers began making errors. Shipments were delayed. Routes attracted scrutiny. Cost climbed. Risk grew. Without dramatic raids or sweeping arrests, the shadow economy lost its footing. Gold that had flowed freely began to slow. As illegal channels became unstable, something unexpected followed. More producers selected legal pathways. The official system long avoided became the safer choice.
Visibility did not merely expose the truth, it reshaped behavior. And once movement was controlled, the leaking stopped. For the first time our gold stayed with us.
When the gold stopped disappearing, its presence was felt beyond mining towns. Revenue that had previously drained into foreign markets remained inside our borders. For the first time in years we could plan with money that actually existed. Instead of approaching lenders or waiting for emergency aid, we could build with confidence. My first major target was energy. Electricity had always been unreliable in ways that paralyzed normal life. Shops locked up before dark. Students opened their books by candlelight. Hospitals kept fragile generators as their only backup. Everyone knew gold was being extracted from our soil, but no one could feel it. That changed in 2025. Power lines pushed into new territory. Households never connected before joined the grid. Transmission networks reached communities living in permanent darkness. Electricity delivered more than light. It brought safety, enabled business, and created stability. Gold was no longer an abstraction on an export ledger. It became visible in streetlights and refrigerators running through the night. This was not cosmetic development. Energy is the foundation of industry, education, and modern life. By converting retained gold into power, we took our first real step towards something lasting. But energy was always only the opening move. It pushed open a door to a larger question. What truly becomes possible when a nation finally holds on to what it produces?
As electricity spread into new regions, a harder truth became clear.
Power alone cannot settle every debt. Rights can activate machines, but they cannot determine who owns those machines or who captures the value they generate. For too long, we had produced wealth without controlling any of it. Energy addressed one wound but revealed another beneath it. If gold could now fund power infrastructure, the next question could not be deferred. Who genuinely controlled the mining system? Infrastructure without ownership still leaves a nation dependent. Power lines can be built, but value can still escape. By the close of 2025, the lesson was undeniable. Retaining revenue was the necessary first move, not the final one. The architecture permitting gold to drain away for decades needed to be rebuilt from within. That became a turning point. The goal was no longer simply to keep gold inside our borders. It was to reshape how gold was produced, managed and owned by our own people.
Energy became a bridge, not a destination. It connected the present to a future demanding deeper structural courage.
The year 2026 is not a continuation of what came before. I am treating it as a reset. Institutions that once played passive fee-collecting roles are being rebuilt to exercise genuine authority. Mining is no longer a background activity producing exports for others to count. It is a strategic sector tied directly to our national planning. Artisanal miners once living in legal gray zones are being organized into cooperatives. That shift changes everything. Cooperatives introduce safety standards, shared negotiating strength, and formal recognition. Miners who once sold gold cheaply to whoever arrived with cash now access transparent channels protecting their labor and earnings. At the same time, we are building a new middle layer in our mining ecosystem. Semi-mechanized operations under local ownership are positioned between large foreign mines and small artisanal pits. This tier keeps value circulating inside the country while increasing efficiency.
Together these changes form a new architecture. The system is no longer built solely to extract and export on behalf of external interests. It is being designed to generate skills, accumulate capital, and build lasting capacity among our own people. This transformation did not begin inside a mine. It began with a political decision. For the first time in decades, I stopped asking how we could fit into the global extraction model, and started asking whether that model deserved to continue. My approach was never about speeches. It was about systems. Control over data. Control over movement. Control over ownership. The principle I kept returning to. Sovereignty is not declared. It is built, patiently, inside every system a nation depends on. When we control our systems, we control our direction. These changes reached beyond mining. They announced a new relationship between our state and our economy. Instead of waiting at the periphery to collect whatever others left behind, we moved to the center of our own development. We stopped asking to be included, and began constructing independence itself. The number 94 is no longer merely a statistic. It is a signal. It shows that even a landlocked Sahelian country can restructure its relationship with its own resources, retain its wealth, and turn that wealth into development people can actually feel. The old story insisted this was impossible, that reform was dangerous, that asserting control would frighten investors away. But what is unfolding here answers that story with evidence. The gold was always in our ground. Our people were always working it. What we lacked was vision, and the confidence to demand better. Now the world watches us not for signs of collapse, but for the shape of our strategy. And that shifts the question to the entire continent. If we can rewrite our resource story from inside a landlocked country surrounded by instability, what excuse does anyone else have? The number 94 represents refusal. Refusal to remain invisible on maps that trace our minerals but erase our sovereignty.
Refusal to keep exporting poverty alongside wealth. Refusal to accept that the history written for us must be the history we inhabit. As this model takes shape, one question remains. Which African nation will be next to take its destiny back?